My parents said he's your brother, help him, until he took everything I had. My parents said he's your brother, help him, so I did. I helped him lie, steal, beg, borrow, ruin my credit, drain my savings, and smile through it all. Until the day I packed his bags, changed the locks, and told our parents they could help him now. I should have known it would end like this. I think deep down I did know, but when it's family, you keep rewriting the same sentence hoping it'll end differently. It started small, that's what they always say, right? It's just a ride to court. Just a few nights on the couch. Just a temporary thing. I told myself I was being a good sister, doing what anyone would do, because when you grow up in a house where family sticks together is more law than love, saying no isn't an option, it's betrayal. The first time he showed up, it was pouring. He had a trash bag full of clothes and a bleeding lip. Said it wasn't his fault. Said his ex was crazy. Said the cops had it out for him. I let him in, of course I did. And for a few weeks he was better. He made dinner once, played board games with my kids, told me I saved his life. I wanted to believe it. God, I did. But then came the little things, cash missing from my wallet, my husband's tools vanishing from the garage, my daughter saying she heard him on the phone late at night whispering about pickup spots. I confronted him, he cried, said he was trying, said he was scared, said if I kicked him out, he'd die. I told myself he was clean, just stressed. My parents backed him. He's making progress, they said. He just needs more time. So I gave him time. I gave him money. I gave him space. I gave him pieces of my sanity, one splinter at a time. Then the credit card bills started coming in, ones I didn't recognize. Accounts I never opened. I called the bank. They said the name on the secondary card was his. He'd stolen my info while I was driving him to NA meetings. He was using my name to buy things I'd never own. I told our parents. They said I was overreacting. Said I should have locked things up better. That maybe he didn't know what he was doing, that I shouldn't abandon him. That word, abandon, hung in the air like mold. I'd heard it before, when I was 10 and he stole from our neighbor. When I was 16 and he got suspended for fighting and I was the one who had to bring his homework home and pretend he was doing better. It was always me cleaning up, smoothing things over, covering tracks. But this time, it was my marriage on the line. My husband had been patient, too patient, but when he found out my brother had pawned his grandfather's watch, the one he wore to our wedding, he lost it. Said it was him or my brother. Said he wouldn't let our kids grow up thinking this was normal. I didn't know what to say. I'd defended my brother so many times the words came out before I could stop them. He didn't mean to, but that night, I knew. I knew I was done. The next morning, I packed his things. He wasn't even there. Left a note that said, "Gone to get clean. Don't wait up." I changed the locks, canceled the cards, called the bank, called the cops, called my parents. Told them if they wanted to play savior, they could start now. They didn't take it well. Said I was cruel. Said he had nowhere else. I didn't care. I had 2 kids watching everything, and I wasn't going to teach them that love means bleeding quietly while someone stabs you again and again. Weeks passed, then months. My brother sent one text, "Hope you're happy." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just blame, classic. I thought it was over, thought maybe he'd drift off into silence and leave us in peace. But peace is a funny thing. It doesn't last long when you've built your life around lies. Because what came next, I never saw coming. And maybe if I'd known what he was really into, I would have thrown him out a long time ago. Underneath the calm, everyday chaos of trying to put my life back together, school drop-offs, quiet dinners, rebuilding trust with my husband, something kept tugging at me. A sense that I hadn't just evicted a problem, I'd invited one in. That feeling didn't go away. Not when I changed my number. Not when I got alerts about someone trying to access my bank account. Not even when my youngest started having nightmares, saying someone was tapping at her window. I kept telling myself it was nothing. Residual fear, trauma, rewiring my brain. But then came the envelope. No stamp. No return address. Just slid under my door like a threat disguised as a whisper. Inside was a single photograph. Me, my kids. At the park 3 days earlier. He was watching us. I didn't show my husband right away. I didn't want to feed the fear, but I knew. It was him, and what really scared me was how close he'd gotten without me noticing. The police said unless he made a direct threat, there wasn't much they could do. So I started locking every door, every window, double-checking the kids' bedroom, setting up cheap cameras I could barely afford. He never appeared on them. Not once, but sometimes things were just wrong. The gate would be open when I knew I closed it. A cigarette butt on the porch, even though we don't smoke. The dog whining at the back door, hackles raised. My parents still called occasionally. My mom cried, told me he was living on the street, said I should have some compassion, that I'd abandoned my own blood. I asked if she'd take him in. She went silent. It was always like that. Sympathy in theory, never in action. One night, my husband got home late and noticed the basement door was unlocked. We never use that door. It leads to a crawl space full of nothing but dust and old Christmas boxes. But it was open, slightly. Like someone had meant to close it but got interrupted. We didn't sleep that night. I sat with my phone in one hand and a hammer in the other, not sure which one would protect me more. The next morning I installed a bolt. A week later the bolt was gone. Just gone. Not broken, not scratched, just missing. I was losing sleep, my appetite, my grip on what was real. Was it all in my head? Was I paranoid? I started to question everything, until the night I caught my daughter staring out the window at 2 a.m. whispering. I asked who she was talking to. She said, "The man with the sad eyes." My heart stopped. I asked what he said. She shrugged. "He just watches. He never smiles." I checked the cameras again. Nothing. But someone had turned two of them just slightly, angling them away from the windows. I didn't tell the police. What would I even say? My estranged brother is maybe watching us, maybe breaking in, maybe just haunting the edges of my life like a shadow that doesn't want to be seen. I knew how it sounded, but I also knew how it felt. I stopped answering my parents' calls. I stopped pretending any of it was salvageable. He'd made his choice, and I'd made mine. But then something happened I couldn't ignore. My neighbor, the quiet one who works night shifts, knocked on my door one afternoon. Said she'd seen someone in our backyard around 3 a.m. a few nights prior. Said she didn't call because she thought it might be family. "He looked a lot like you," she added. I thanked her, closed the door, sat on the floor and cried, because I'd spent months trying to move on, rebuild, forget. And all it took was one neighbor's passing comment to unravel every thread I'd barely held together. And still, I hadn't told the full truth, not even to my husband, because there was something I'd found, something I kept hidden in the back of my closet, buried under boxes of baby clothes. A second envelope, this one with a note, 7 words scrawled in his handwriting. "I know what you did to me, but the thing was, I didn't." And that's when I realized maybe I didn't know my brother at all, or worse, maybe I did. Just not the version I let myself believe in. I started going back through old photos, old emails, old texts, anything that might give me some clue, some thread to pull. I wanted to find the moment where things shifted, where my brother stopped being my brother and became whatever this was, but that moment doesn't exist. It's not a clean break, it's erosion, slow, quiet, invisible until the ground falls out from under you. I remembered a voicemail from years ago, long before he showed up on my doorstep. I'd saved it because it felt different at the time. He sounded lucid, calm, almost scared. He'd said, "I think I hurt someone. I don't know what to do." I called him back that night. He never answered, never mentioned it again. And like an idiot, I let it go. Maybe I didn't want to know. Maybe part of me understood that helping him meant carrying more than I ever should have been asked to. I told myself I was doing it for the family, for our parents, for his future. But in truth, I think I was doing it for the story. The idea that one day I could say I'd saved him. I wanted that ending. The kind where everyone claps. The kind where the black sheep finds redemption and the loyal sister is praised for never giving up. But real life doesn't care about your narrative. Real life leaves cigarette burns on your windowsill and disappears your basement bolt in the middle of the night. I finally told my husband about the second envelope, about the note. He sat in silence for a long time, then asked, "Do you think he's dangerous?" I didn't have an answer. That was scarier than saying yes, because not knowing meant I couldn't prepare. A few days later, a manila envelope arrived in the mail. This one had a return address, a P.O. box in a city 2 hours away. Inside were court records, not mine, not his. A woman's. I didn't recognize the name, but the charges chilled me: aggravated assault, witness tampering, obstruction. The date was 3 years ago. Around the same time he disappeared from our parents' radar for a while. I started digging, found an old newspaper clipping, found her photo, and behind her, barely visible, my brother, smiling, arm around her like they were together. I don't know what happened between them. The records were partial, some redacted, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the story I'd been told, the one about addiction, recovery, second chances, was only one version. Maybe not even close to the truth. I tried calling the number listed in the documents, not expecting it to go anywhere. It didn't, disconnected. But 2 days later, I got a message from a blocked number. Just 2 words: "Stop digging." My hands went numb. I deleted the message, didn't tell anyone, not even my husband, because now it felt like I was in it alone, not because he didn't care, but because dragging anyone else into this felt cruel. The more I pulled, the more I realized this wasn't just about addiction or bad decisions or even family. It was about control. He wanted to control how I saw him, how others saw me. Maybe he always had. I remembered when we were kids, how he'd lie so easily and so convincingly that even I started to doubt myself. How he'd steal something and convince me I lost it. How he'd break something and make me apologize for it. Our parents always said he was just high-spirited, that boys act out, that I needed to be more patient, more forgiving. I think I spent my whole childhood rehearsing how to excuse him. And now, I was living in the aftermath of that rehearsal, a script I didn't write but kept performing anyway. Then one morning my daughter came to me with something in her hand, a plastic keycard, hotel style. She said she found it in the laundry basket. None of us had stayed in a hotel recently. I googled the logo. It was from a roadside motel 40 minutes away. I didn't tell my husband. I drove there myself. The woman at the desk looked tired, disinterested. Until I showed her the key, she hesitated, said she wasn't supposed to share guest info. I said I was looking for my missing brother. That part was technically true. She looked at me for a long time, then scribbled a number on a sticky note and slid it across the counter. He stayed in room 207, she said. Checked out 2 nights ago, alone, but he left something behind. She disappeared into a back room, came back holding a Ziploc bag. Inside was a watch. My husband's watch, the one we thought had been pawned months ago. I thanked her, took it, and left. I sat in my car for 10 minutes staring at it, wondering what it meant. That he kept it. That he didn't sell it. That he was still this close, watching, moving, leaving traces like breadcrumbs. But leading where? I didn't know. I still don't. I drove home in silence, the watch heavy in my pocket like it still carried the weight of everything he'd taken from us. I didn't tell my husband right away. I needed time to think, to understand what kind of game this was. Why return something now? Why that? It felt like a message, but I couldn't decipher it. That night I sat in bed long after everyone else had gone to sleep, scrolling through my phone, rereading every text I'd ever gotten from him, looking for some pattern. Some hint, something I'd missed. And then, almost by accident, I opened an old shared folder we'd used to plan a surprise party for our dad years ago. I hadn't touched it in forever. But when I opened it, there was a new file, dated 3 days ago, titled just Help. I almost dropped my phone, my stomach knotted. I tapped it open. Inside was a single image, a blurry photo, low light. Grainy, but unmistakably my brother. He looked wrecked. Eyes sunken, skin pale, sitting on what looked like a concrete floor, a cracked tile wall behind him. It didn't look like a motel or a rehab center. It looked like a basement, or a holding cell. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I opened it again, just to be sure it was real. But when I refreshed the folder, the file was gone. I tried everything, cloud history, cache, nothing, like it had never been there. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the dark, trying to convince myself I hadn't imagined it, that he wasn't playing some twisted joke. Or worse, that someone else had access to that folder. Someone who wanted me to see it. I started keeping a journal, writing down every weird thing, every noise, every item out of place. It made me feel a little more in control, until I realized pages were missing. Not torn out, just gone, entries I knew I'd written. Things I remembered recording. I asked my daughter if she'd touched my notebook. She said no. My husband said maybe I forgot to write them. But I knew I hadn't. The kind of details I was recording, you don't forget those. One afternoon, while cleaning out the garage, I found an old shoebox labeled Xmas lights. Inside wasn't anything holiday-related, just papers. Dozens of them, printouts of emails, bank statements, screenshots of texts, mine, my brother's, even some I didn't remember sending. Someone had been collecting them, curating them, like evidence. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go to the police with a box of my own digital life. Couldn't explain why I didn't know where it came from. Couldn't prove any of it was real. But I also couldn't ignore it anymore. Someone wanted me to see this. Someone was building something. A case, a warning, a trail. But for what? I took photos of everything. Hid the originals. Moved the family into a hotel for a few days without explanation. Told my kids it was a mini vacation. Told my husband I just needed to breathe. I didn't tell them that I found another envelope under the hotel door the next morning. This one with a USB drive. No note, no markings. Just a small black stick that hummed like a heartbeat in my hand. I plugged it into my laptop with shaking fingers. At first, nothing happened. Then a folder opened. Inside were 5 video files, all dated from the same night. The night I kicked him out. I clicked on the first one. The footage was grainy, like from an old flip phone. The angle was low, slightly tilted. I saw myself through the living room window, pacing, yelling, him standing at the door with his bag, silent, watching. File 2 showed him walking down our street, turning to look back at the house. File 3 was him, outside a 7-Eleven, talking to someone. Couldn't see their face, couldn't hear the audio. File 4, that one hit me hardest. It was my kid's bedroom window from the outside. Taken from the tree line at night. Both kids were asleep inside, nothing happened. No motion, just watching. And File 5, it was just black. 60 seconds of pure darkness, but at the end a voice, low, croaky, whispering. She still doesn't know. I shut the laptop and threw up in the bathroom. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I couldn't tell if it was real, if someone had doctored it, if he'd done this himself, but I knew one thing for sure. Someone was trying to unravel me, and it was working. ChatGPT Skazel. I deleted the videos. I told myself it was to protect the kids, to keep my husband from seeing and spiraling, to stay ahead of whatever this was. But deep down, I think I did it because I couldn't bear having them exist in the same world I was still trying to function in. The USB drive went into a locked box in the attic, wrapped in 3 plastic bags like that would somehow keep the horror contained. I stopped sleeping again. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear that voice, she still doesn't know, and I'd wake up gasping, convinced there was someone standing in the hallway. My daughter started wetting the bed again. My son became quiet, guarded, like he was trying to protect me from something he didn't understand. My husband asked if I wanted to talk to someone, a therapist, a doctor. I said I was just tired, said work was stressful. But I think he knew, not the details but the shape of the thing sitting in the room with us. He stopped asking questions when I started crying at the sound of the doorbell. Then, 2 weeks after we got back from the hotel, I received a letter. Not typed, handwritten, addressed to my maiden name, no return address. Inside it just said, "You have 30 days." That was it. No context, no signature, just a countdown I didn't understand and couldn't ignore. I scanned the envelope for prints, nothing. Took it to the police. Again, they said without a threat, their hands were tied. I asked about restraining orders. They asked if I had proof he was behind any of this. I didn't, not directly. So I left with a brochure and a gnawing sense of helplessness that made me want to scream. I started counting the days. I didn't know what would happen on day 30. But every sunrise made me feel like I was walking closer to something I wouldn't come back from. I hired a private investigator. It cost more than we could afford, but I didn't care. I gave him everything: names, dates, the USB, copies of the court documents, the hotel key, even the shoebox from the garage. He promised to dig quietly. 2 days later, he called me, told me to meet him at a diner 30 minutes outside town. I left without telling my husband. Drove in silence with my phone on airplane mode. The PI was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth in the back with a file thick enough to snap a rubber band. He didn't smile, just slid it across the table and said, "You're not paranoid." The folder contained photos, some I recognized from the USB, others I'd never seen. My brother outside our old house, my kids' school, my job, my husband's office. Timelines, maps, receipts, logins. He showed me a rental storage unit in a neighboring town rented under a fake name. The access code matched my old phone number. He showed me a list of women, 5 of them, all of whom had restraining orders against my brother or had filed police reports involving coercion, fraud, even stalking. One name had a star next to it, the same name from the court records in the envelope. "You need to talk to her," he said. I hesitated. "She doesn't know you're coming," he added. "And she might not talk, but if she does, I think you'll understand what he's really been doing." I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I drove to the address he gave me. A small house on the edge of a town I'd never been to, with a broken mailbox and a dog barking from behind a chain-link fence. She answered the door slowly, peeking through the crack like she expected something bad. I introduced myself, explained I wasn't there to cause trouble. Her eyes changed when I said my brother's name. Not fear, recognition, sadness, rage. She let me in. Her house was quiet, sparse, like she'd been trying to disappear inside of it. We sat on her couch. I told her everything I'd seen, everything I suspected. When I mentioned the 30 days letter, she flinched, said she got one too, years ago, and again more recently. Hers said, "You have 60. I asked what happened when the time ran out. She went quiet. Then finally, she told me a story I still haven't fully processed. About manipulation, about surveillance, about him pretending to be someone he wasn't for almost a year. About her losing her job, her family, her reputation, piece by piece, while he played the victim to everyone else. He doesn't want money," she said. "He wants ruin. He wants to be the storm in your life so you never feel safe in the calm again." I asked her why. What was the point? She shook her head. "He's broken, but he makes sure everyone around him shatters first." She handed me a photo, him, younger, healthier, sitting beside someone I didn't recognize. The back of the photo had a name written in our mother's handwriting. A name I hadn't heard since childhood. A name no one in our family ever talked about. When I asked her about it, she just said, "I think that's where it started." And I realized maybe I'd been looking at the wrong part of the story all along. Maybe the answer wasn't in what he'd done recently, but in the silence we'd all inherited years ago. I drove home gripping that photo like it was a piece of evidence from a crime I hadn't realized I'd been a part of my whole life. The name on the back, it unlocked something. A half-memory like a room I'd been barred from. I didn't tell my husband about the woman, not yet. I needed to make sense of it first. Instead, I went to my parents' house. Alone. I didn't call ahead, just showed up and rang the bell like it was a normal Sunday afternoon. My mother opened the door, surprised. My father stood behind her, cautious. I asked them about the name, the boy from the photo. At first they acted confused, said it didn't ring a bell, but I saw the twitch in my dad's jaw. The way my mom's fingers trembled slightly as she crossed her arms. I pressed. I showed them the photo. Silence. Then my father said quietly, "You were too young. We didn't think you remembered." He looked at my mother. She looked away. I didn't say anything. I just waited. My father sat down heavily on the couch and motioned for me to do the same. "That was your cousin," he said. "Your uncle's boy. They lived with us for a while after his mom died. Things were complicated. I'd never heard this. I knew I had an uncle who died young, but we were always told it was a car accident and that he didn't have kids. That's what they'd said. That's what I believed." My dad continued, slowly, like every word cost him something. "Your cousin stayed with us for a few months. Your brother and he. They were close, closer than we thought, but something happened. One day he just vanished. Ran away, they said, left a note, but there were rumors, accusations, and then your uncle died. It was all very fast. After that, we didn't speak of him. Your mother thought it was better that way. I looked at my mom, her lips were tight, and my brother, I asked, did he ever talk about it? My dad nodded, barely. He had nightmares for years, but he never said much, just that he missed him. Then eventually he stopped bringing him up. I sat there feeling like a stranger in my own history, like the foundation I'd built my life on had hairline fractures all along, just waiting for the right weight to crack it. My mother finally spoke. It was a hard time, for everyone. And your brother, he was never the same after that. I left without saying much. I didn't trust myself to speak. When I got home, I pulled out the shoebox again, went through every paper, every clue, now with new eyes. I searched the cousin's name online. Nothing, no records, no missing person case. It was like he'd been erased. That night, I had a dream. I was back in our childhood home. My brother was standing at the top of the stairs. Staring down at me, behind him, a door slowly creaked open, and I could see a figure in shadow. My brother turned, looked at me, and said, "You weren't supposed to know." I woke up sweating. My phone buzzed. A new email, no subject, no sender. Just one line, day 26. I hadn't told anyone about the countdown, not even the pie, and now I was running out of days. I printed the email, burned the paper, bought a second lock for every door, got security cams installed professionally. I checked on the kids every night 3, 4, or 5 times. I stopped answering unknown numbers. I shut down my social media. I made my life smaller and smaller, trying to feel safe again. But the walls just closed in with me. Then, one afternoon, I got a call from the private investigator. He said he had something I needed to see. I met him in a public library, back corner, near the old microfilm machines no one used anymore. He pulled out a manila envelope and said, "I think this is what he's been building toward." Inside were screenshots, message boards, obscure subreddits, anonymous posts that started years ago, all with a familiar pattern, a sympathetic story about a family betrayal, a sister who turned everyone against him, slowly morphing into something darker, claims that the sister had framed him, stolen from him, ruined his life. Each post had thousands of comments, some of them recent, all of them told from the same perspective, and the usernames, variants of our family's names, scrambled, repeated, hidden in plain sight. He's been building a narrative, the PI said, online, quietly. He's turning strangers into sympathizers. He's rewriting the story until even he believes it, until someone else might step in and do the damage for him. I felt sick. It wasn't just about watching us anymore. He was poisoning the world around me, one drop at a time, and it was working. Some of the posts had links, real names, real locations, my kid's school, my husband's office, even our church. I asked the PI how long he thought this had been going on. He looked at me and said, "Longer than you want to believe." I left the library in a daze, clutching the envelope like it contained something radioactive, because in a way it did. It held the version of me he was feeding to the world. A version I didn't recognize. A version twisted by half-truths and outright lies. And the worst part was, it wasn't completely unbelievable. He had just enough truth woven in to make people question, to make them doubt me if I ever tried to defend myself. I spent the next 3 days taking screenshots of everything I could find, creating backups, encrypting files, building a case like I was preparing for a trial I hadn't been formally summoned to yet, but felt coming like a slow earthquake under my feet. The PI called again. Said one of the usernames linked to a message board that had gone dark, completely wiped, except for one final post that appeared for exactly 4 minutes before vanishing. It said, "You can rewrite a story 1,000 times, but truth bleeds through eventually. Watch her fall." And underneath it listed coordinates, not an address, just a spot on a map, a wooded area an hour outside town. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to be the kind of person who followed cryptic threats into remote areas, but I also knew I wouldn't be able to sleep until I saw what was there. I drove in daylight, told my husband I was running errands, didn't bring my phone. The location led me down a gravel road to a rusted-out fence. Beyond it, trees, nothing else. I walked until I found it, a plastic container half buried in mud. Inside was a flash drive and a laminated photo of me, from behind, sitting on the floor of my daughter's bedroom, reading to her. The angle was high, like from a vent or a corner camera. My stomach turned. I hadn't seen that photo before. I didn't know it existed. I didn't know when it had been taken, or how. I took the drive home and plugged it into an old laptop I hadn't used in years. One not connected to anything. The files were encrypted, but one opened. A video, no audio, just surveillance footage, labeled by date and time. My house, my backyard, my kitchen. Clips going back months. Not every day, but enough to make me realize he'd been watching long after I thought he was gone. Some from outside, some from inside. Different angles, different lighting. One of them showed me sitting in the kitchen with my husband. We were arguing about what I couldn't remember. But the camera zoomed slightly, as if someone had controlled it, as if someone was watching live. Another file was labeled failure. It was footage of the night I kicked him out, of him walking down the driveway. He stopped halfway, stared back at the house, then slowly sank to the curb, and buried his face in his hands. It stayed there, frozen, for minutes. He didn't move, just sat like a statue carved in grief. I closed the laptop and locked it in a drawer. I didn't tell anyone, because I wasn't sure who the footage was meant to punish, me or him, and maybe that was the point. Maybe he wanted me to see the version of him that still broke hearts, that still made me question, that still knew how to push the right button in the right moment to make me second-guess everything. The next morning, I found a voicemail on my landline. I hadn't even realized it still worked. It was short, raspy breathing. Then, she still doesn't know what she did. I didn't erase it. I played it 3 times. Then again. I sat in the hallway listening to it over and over until I didn't know if I was angry, terrified, or both. I told the Pi. He said he had a contact who might be able to trace the call. I didn't ask for details. I didn't care how legal it was. I just wanted answers. That night, I stayed awake with the lights on, watching the door, waiting. But nothing came, no messages, no envelopes, no movement on the cameras, just silence. And for the first time, that scared me more than anything, because silence from him was never peace. It was the sound of something building, something close. I started sleeping in bursts, eating mechanically. I stopped driving the same route twice, took my kids out of school and started homeschooling them for health reasons. My husband didn't fight it. I think he knew. I think he felt it too. The tension, the invisible countdown. I still didn't know what would happen on day 30. But I was starting to think it wouldn't be loud. It wouldn't be a bang. It would be something quieter, slower, like trust unraveling, like a family breaking, like the version of me he built online slowly overtaking the real one until no one remembered what the truth ever looked like. Day 30 came and went without anything dramatic. No knock on the door, no explosion, no blood, just the same low hum of dread that had followed me for weeks, like a song I couldn't turn off. That made it worse somehow. Because I couldn't tell if the threat had passed or if the silence meant it had only just begun. My husband noticed I wasn't talking much anymore. He tried to get me to take a walk, watch a movie, go back to work. I said I needed more time. What I didn't say was that I was waiting for something I couldn't describe. Not an event. A shift. Something in the air, in the way people looked at me, in the rhythm of daily life. And then one day it happened. My boss called, said he received an anonymous tip that I was under investigation for fraud, that someone had submitted documents claiming I'd misused company funds, falsified hours. He said HR was opening a review. I know it's probably nothing, he said, but we have to take it seriously. I sat there, phone to my ear, realizing it had begun, not with a bang, but with a file. A whisper, a seed of doubt planted where it would hurt the most. I'd worked at that company for 8 years, never been written up, never missed a deadline, but all it takes is one accusation to crack a reputation. I knew who it was. I didn't say his name, but I felt him in every syllable of that call, in the way my boss's voice hesitated, in the way he said we have to follow protocol like it meant something. I hung up and checked the cameras again. Nothing. Still nothing. I started logging everything. Who I talked to, what I said, what I did. Like I was building a case for a future trial I hadn't been notified of yet. A week later, my kids' school called. They'd received an email, anonymous, with concerning information about our home environment, allegations of neglect, unsafe conditions. My daughter cried when the counselor pulled her out of class to ask questions. My son asked if we were in trouble. I told him no, but I didn't believe it. I was losing control of the narrative. And I knew that's what he wanted, not just to hurt me, to unwrite me, to turn the world sideways and watch me scramble to stay upright. And worst of all, it was working. My husband asked me one night if I was hiding something. He didn't accuse, he asked gently, carefully, the way you'd ask someone who might break. I didn't answer right away, just stared at him until he looked away. That scared me more than any voicemail, because once doubt enters a marriage, it doesn't knock. It spreads like smoke, and you don't see how thick it's gotten until you're choking on it. I reached back out to the woman I'd visited before, the one who knew him best, asked if she'd been through this. The slow undoing. She called me late at night and said something I haven't forgotten since. He doesn't destroy you directly. He makes you do it to yourself. He hands you the matches and waits for you to strike. I didn't know what to say, but I started keeping a burner phone, not to call the cops, they couldn't help, but in case I needed to vanish. Not disappear, just disconnect. Be unreachable, untraceable. I never told my husband. I started stashing cash, keeping clothes in the trunk. Not because I had a plan, but because I knew if it came, it would come fast. Then, around week 5, someone sent me a photo, no message, just an image. My brother in a hospital bed. Tubes, machines, eyes closed, unconscious. I didn't know what to think. Was it real? A trick? A setup? The timestamp was from 3 days ago. I called every hospital in a 50-mile radius. No one had him. At least not under his name. The Pi said he'd follow the lead. But part of me wondered, was this a warning, a performance, a genuine accident, or a trap? And then I remembered what he said in the voicemail. She still doesn't know what she did. And the terrifying thought came back, what if I actually didn't? What if there was something in our childhood, something I'd buried, forgotten, denied? What if this wasn't revenge, but justice, twisted, broken, but rooted in something real? And if so, what had I done? I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the kitchen table with the lights off, staring at the photo on my phone, zooming in on his face over and over like I could read something in the lines around his mouth, the bruises under his eyes, the way the hospital gown hung off his collarbone like it wasn't his body anymore. I thought about going to see him, just walking into the emergency room and saying his name like it still meant something, like we weren't on opposite sides of a war one never agreed to fight in. But I didn't, because by then I didn't know what was real. And I sure as hell didn't know what was safe. So instead I wrote a letter, not to him, not to my parents, to myself. I wrote out everything I remembered, not just the threats and the envelopes and the surveillance, but the old stuff, the things I hadn't let myself touch in decades. Like how when we were kids, he used to convince me I'd done things I never did. He'd move stuff around in my room and wait for me to notice. He'd say I talked in my sleep, said terrible things. And I believed him, because I was the quiet one, the one who wanted peace, the one who carried guilt like it was part of my spine. I wrote about the time I caught him stealing from our neighbor and told our mom, and how she made me apologize for lying because he cried louder. I wrote about the night I found him in the garage with a knife and he said he was just cleaning it. Even though there was no reason to be out there, no lights on, nothing but that slow metallic sound of the blade sliding against the whetstone, I wrote about the day he left and how I almost chased after him. Almost, and how sometimes I still hate myself for not running faster, not grabbing his arm, not fixing whatever broke inside him, but most of all, I wrote about the silence, the years we all pretended everything was fine, like pretending made it true. The family holidays where we set extra places at the table but never acknowledged why. The voicemails we deleted without listening. The emails we marked as spam. The way we all quietly agreed to remember the best version of him and forget the rest. By morning, I felt something shift. Not peace, not even close, but clarity. Like I'd finally stopped playing a part in a story I didn't write. I took the letter and locked it in the same box with the USB, the photo, the burner phone, and all the evidence. I labeled it if anything happens. And then I went on with my life. I kept the cameras. I kept the second locks. I kept my kids close and my answers vague and my instincts sharp. I started going back to work, slowly, carefully. The investigation cleared. The anonymous claims could not be substantiated. The school case was dropped, quietly, no apology, just silence, like nothing happened. But I know better now. I know silence doesn't mean safety. It means something is waiting, watching. I don't know if he's alive. I never got confirmation. Maybe that photo was real. Maybe it wasn't. But sometimes I still get letters, not threats, not messages, just pieces, torn pages from old books I loved as a child, receipts from stores I haven't visited in years, a single puzzle piece taped to the back of a birthday card, nothing illegal, nothing traceable, just enough to remind me he's still out there, still rewriting, still waiting for the ending he thinks he's owed. And maybe that ending will never come, maybe I've already survived it, but I keep the box locked. I keep the letter updated. And I keep watching the shadows at the edge of the backyard, not because I expect to see him, but because now I know what it means when I don't.